Live video is starting. Let's see. When is it starting? Here we are. We are live. How y'all doing? If you are seeing this, would you drop me a little note in the comments? Say hello. It has been a minute. It has been a minute since I have been live in this group. And I apologize for that. But I had to do me. You know what I mean? As one of my good friends pointed out to me recently, not only am I a mother of two very young kids, not only am I on a journey of my own healing, which takes, when you're dedicated, as I am, takes a lot of time and energy, but on top of that, I am also obviously trying to create a space of awareness and healing and personal development for a larger group of people. And all of those things are just a lot sometimes. So I had to move away from this, not move away from this group, but move away from the lives for a little while, and now I'm going to try to incorporate them back in. So if you're viewing this and you can see me and hear me, then let me know so I know everybody can hear me, and I am so happy to be back in. Okay. So let's talk about relationships. Oh, snap. So not only is it the month, it's almost the end of the month of February already. So, February comes, Valentine's Day comes, and you see just like all from the, probably from January, right? You see all the hearts and the chocolates and the red and the pink and the love and da da da. But the truth is that no holiday is going to soften the hardness that sometimes, and the resistance, right? That sometimes comes between us and love. And so, let's talk about love, not from an intimate perspective, but just in your relationships, because obviously, as far as this conversation goes, we're talking about relationships with people who you love, not just intimate, not just your partner or your husband or your lover or whatever it is, but your friends and your relatives, right? Or your chosen family. And we all have people who we have extremely healthy relationships with, and we all have people who we have strained relationships with. And as I've, mentioned, there's no holiday that's going to melt the ice around your heart pertaining to a strained relationship. It takes work, and it takes, here's, one thing that's not on the list of the things you don't want to hear potentially, but we'll add one in. It takes work on you in order to improve your relationships. I'm just going to repeat that. It takes you being willing and able to work on yourself if you want to improve your relationships. So let's just start there. This is going to be a quick talk, and I'm going to tick down 3 things that you don't want to hear. You're not going to want to hear them about your relationships. But we speak truth in this group. We don't bullshit in this group. And so I would love to hear your feedback or your comments as I go through some of this information. So your relationships are everywhere, right? Let's just clarify and make sure we're clear about how important it is to work on your relationship. So this is essentially the form of self-care that we're talking about today, is working on your relationships. That action. If we're talking about an actual action or practice, self-care related, that you're going to do, obviously it is not a pretty one sometimes. And again, just clarifying that self-care, especially the way that we talk about it in this group, is not always pretty. Sometimes it's ugly. Sometimes it's hard. but self-care is always worth it, right? So like you talk about things that are hard, like getting a degree, like busting your ass in school, busting your ass to get the promotion, giving birth, like, and having all of those things be worth it on the other side, right? Well, same goes for self-care. And honestly, I would argue that self-care is one of the only things that is always worth it, right? Sometimes we strive towards something and we don't really know whether it's going to be worth it. You don't really know, on the other hand. Always worth it, self-care. And even if it is ugly. So we're talking about the ugly practice of self-care, of working on your relationships today. And first of all, I would love to know if anyone else in this 2/22/22 energy of this past week, which the number 2 energetically is very much connected to relationships. Like when you think about it, like 1 + 1 = 2, like 1 and 1 coming together. So relationships, connection. So if anybody has been feeling the transformational energy around relationships in their lives this week, or maybe even this month, let me know, right? It is interesting too that, February is the second month of the year too, and that is the meaning. So I'm really feeling it. And this talk, obviously, just like so many of my other, topics that I choose to speak about, they're always pertaining to, obviously, lessons that I'm learning in my own life that I feel need to be shared. And I absolutely have had some conversations with some of the closest people in my life that have not been easy lately. And one of the ways that I think that I learn lessons that I know need to be shared is that I'm not afraid to have hard conversations. This is one of my gifts. I'm not afraid to have hard conversations. In fact, my preference, literally, my preference is to have hard conversations. And I put people off a lot because of this trait of mine where I want to dig deeper. I want to explore the root cause. I want to understand, especially if there's a point of contention or a confrontation or some kind of strained part of a relationship. I want to get into it. And many people don't. So this is also part of why I do what I do, is that I'm also comfortable in that I'm comfortable in that gray area that can be uncomfortable. So let's talk about the gray area. How many of you are comfortable with the gray area, with the area between right and wrong, between black and white? So, for example, comfortable with the concept of this is right, but this is also right. This felt right at the moment, but now in retrospect I see it wasn't right. And being okay with that. And another example would be, this person did this or said this, which hurt. So that's one side, right? But it wasn't their intention. So that's the other side. How many people are comfortable with that concept of being hurt or feeling, obviously, emotions, feeling your feelings around something, but then also being able to understand when it was intentional or not, and have that kind of shift your viewpoint a bit. There are plenty of people who just simply cannot live in that place. And nothing is right or wrong, which we're going to get into as well. Nothing is right or wrong, which is one of the things you probably don't want to hear. So let's get into it. Now that we've established, right, that this form of self-care can be really ugly sometimes. And nuanced. That's the other part of the gray area, right? How many of you are comfortable with nuance? Meaning, yeah, it's not black and white. Things are both end in many cases. 3 things you may not want to hear. 1, when you are viewing a relationship of yours as strained in some way because someone has either done or said something or not done or said something, right? They either did or said something, potentially, whether it's to you or affecting you or whatever, or they didn't do something or didn't say something that you feel they should have done or they should have said, right? We can kind of, cover a lot of bases when there's a strain in a relationship around that. When we kind of portray our shoulds onto someone, we're setting expectations for them, right? We're setting expectations for a person. And so for a moment, I would love for you to think about how it feels in your body, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, when someone places expectations on you, right? Some expectations feel natural, especially as women. For most of us who are listening to this, the expectation of prioritizing your family, the expectation of, I don't know, tidying your house, that's a whole nother rabbit hole of stuff to talk about. Sometimes expectations feel natural because society already set those expectations for you and you just ate them up. And so now you're living it, right? But the reality is that if we are doing the work to connect to like our real truth, who we really, really are, and to like be at unity with our mind, body, and soul, we set our own expectations. And any expectations that come from the external show up as pressure. So for a moment, think about what it might feel like. Ask yourself if it feels like pressure when other people outside of you are putting expectations on you. And then turn it around for a second. And I'll repeat what I said. When we are angry or irritable in a relationship, or worse, right? Because of what someone did or said or didn't say or do, we are living under the assumption that our expectation of them is just the way that it should be. Okay? But our expectations are based on our needs, and our expectations are based on our truth and our current situation, our current circumstances in our lives, and they're also pertaining to our own perception. My perception of this world is different than your perception of this world. So I'd love to know how that sits. Are you setting expectations for someone? Kathleen's here. Hi, Kathleen. I need to have hard conversations. Don't fester. Yeah, the festering is literally, as we would say in the yogi world, like the vrittis, the mental modifications come in, or like the anxieties and the sadness, right, around, and the limiting beliefs. That's all those types of thoughts that start to swirl around a topic or around a relationship because we're festering in our emotions. Okay? So when we talk about having these hard conversations, and I'll just make sure I jump off of what Kathleen said to make sure that we're digging into that. Having these hard conversations, if we're going to have them constructively, then we need to we need to take a step back, slow down, and look at these three awarenesses first. So that way we can come back to love. What we're trying to do is come back to a space of attachment and love, and come back to a space of being able to feel compassion and empathy for the other person. Because once we get into that space of festering around the emotions, the hard emotions pertaining to a strained relationship, it all just snowballs into a hardness around your heart and your feeling brain, right? And makes it very hard to have a constructive and productive conversation that isn't just a straight up yelling match / argument, right? So we're becoming aware of these three pieces now so that we can eventually come to that place of awareness, right? That way we can actually like release the release the thoughts and belief systems around that relationship that are not serving, and then come back to that space of love and compassion and empathy to have that conversation. And I'm just going to say from now, I understand that this is not easy work, and that there are situations where it's going to be pretty darn hard to feel compassion towards someone, right? And there are like much deeper conversations that I would have with a person in that situation if I was coaching them, for example, around setting boundaries, for example, with the person, right? And like that's a whole nother can of worms. But yeah, this isn't easy work. But we're doing it just by listening to this conversation and just by having this conversation, right? So beautiful. Thank you, Kathleen, for adding that. Number two of 3 things you don't want to hear. Here it goes. You're not right. You're not right. You think you're right, but you are not right. You're right according to you and your perception and the veil through which you see the world. You are right. The very first sutra in yoga, which translates to thread, which basically is like when we talk about the Yoga Sutras, it's just like, the threads of life, like the threads that hold your spirit together, right? So the very first sutra references the now. But it doesn't just mean like the typical sense of now versus the past or the future, right? Which is in itself a very important space to live in, the now, right? So if we're in a relationship and all we can think about is what they have done or said in the past or not done and said in the past, and we are having a very hard time focusing on what's actually happening right now, right? That's one thing. But this first Yoga Sutra talks about now in a deeper sense of, am I actually living in this moment now as it actually is? Or am I viewing now through a veil of perception? And the answer is yes. Like, yes, we are all viewing the world through a veil of perception, and that perception has been generated by many, many things. It's generated by our experiences, by our past, by our development, by our childhood, by our religious and spiritual beliefs, by programming and conditioning, by society. That perception by which we view someone or something has been built and contains many pieces. But my perception of the world and the veil through which I see the world is not the same veil as yours or anyone else's. So it's all perception. And going deeper into this, and this is why I say you're not right and neither are they, that there's technically no right. And this is why I want to make sure you all are ready for nuance, right? For being in that gray area. Because we can only communicate with someone and or converse and or argue or whatever it is. We can only communicate with someone at the level of our awareness and their awareness. So they're communicating with you at the level of their awareness, and we're communicating with them at the level of their awareness, of our awareness, excuse me. And you, through this veil that you're seeing the world, have a very distinct view of how they should act and what they should say and what is right and what is wrong based on your own perception. And that is not their reality. That is your reality. So we set expectations, going back to the first thing you don't want to hear. We set expectations based on our own reality, and that is not their reality. It doesn't mean that we will never see eye to eye, that we will never, ever, come to an agreed upon understanding about what we want our relationship to look like. It doesn't mean that. It just means that you can't go from that. That's like almost like ground zero, right? That space of I'm just shooting all these ideas and thoughts at you, or sitting with my own emotions about you without, communicating at all, pertaining only to my own awareness and reality. And I am not in any way willing to account for the fact that your awareness and reality might look and feel very different than that. We can't stay there, is the point. It's like ground zero, right? So honesty from a space of compassion and empathy is a way that we get to a place where we can have those harder conversations, and we learn and grow from those hard conversations. Like like having that hard conversation is not, it might not be like we turn the switch from, shit relationship to beautiful relationship. Probably not. But maybe we get from ground zero to level 1 or level 2, and where even if it's not even readily available, if there's no available evidence of that growth, even having had that hard conversation over time, the hard conversation, including all those words that come from a place of love, sometimes we have to let that part fester, right? Which kind of leads me to the last one. You cannot and will not change anyone. You cannot and will not change anyone. I can't get in your brain, for example, and flip the switch on what your perception is to what my perception is. Also, geek side over here wants to bring your attention to your nervous system. Maybe someone in your life isn't doing what you think they should do, right? Whether that thing you think they should do is pertaining to their own improvement or making your life easier or whatever it is, right? They are not doing it or saying it, or maybe they're continuing to do or say something that they should stop. Either one, right? We have to get out of a victim mentality that somehow their lack of action or continued action, first of all, is specifically around hurting you. Now, there are cases that are obviously not what I'm saying right now. There are obviously situations where a person might very well do something blatantly to harm you. That's not the type of relationships I'm talking about in this conversation, because those relationships we need hard boundaries around. And we approach those, somebody who's doing something very, very intentionally with beyond the shadow of a doubt to hurt you, we can let go of that relationship in big or small ways. But when we're talking about a relationship, like I said in the beginning of the conversation, that we, with somebody that at our core we actually love and that we actually want to improve that relationship, or that we don't want to release that relationship from our lives, we have to accept that not only can we not set these hard expectations, not only can we demand that we are right, but we cannot and will not change anyone. Someone will change when they are ready in their nervous system to do so. Someone will change when their nervous system is in a space to do so. So that comes with many mistakes that hopefully lead to awareness and growth, but may not always. It comes from getting into that space of awareness from conflict and challenge, and taking that awareness and taking action and implementing that into your life, and maybe failing all over again. That is how a nervous system over time becomes more and more ready to actually change, for the person to actually change. This is the same reason why it takes people many, women, for example, they have this goal of weight loss always, right? It's just an example that's coming up for me right now. they have a goal of weight loss, for example, and whatever the reason is, that's a whole nother can of worms. But it takes so long to get sustainable results, because making those kinds of changes that need to happen for sustainable weight loss, for example, it takes our nervous system so long to come into a space of discipline, and where we are actually ready to live differently and make different decisions reliably and with confidence. So you're, again, setting expectations potentially for a person who is just not ready to do what you think they should do or should stop doing, right? A person can only help themselves. What you can do is you can lead by example. It's probably the best thing that you can possibly do. Again, bringing it back home to the first thing I mentioned that you don't want to hear. The best thing you can do is lead by example, which means the best thing you can do to improve your relationships is to work on you. So the last piece of this is about self-regulating and co-regulating. The reason that our relationships are so important in our lives, and they're such a massive piece of our lives, and the reason that working on your relationships is such an important practice of self-care, is because your relationships are all about co-regulating. So within our nervous systems pertaining to our mental and emotional wellness, we have two modes of regulating: self-regulating and co-regulating. We're not only self-regulating. We can't only rely on ourselves and implementing self-care that's very self-based, and expect that to do everything, because our lives are filled with relationships. Whether that relationship is with someone who is super close to you, like a best friend that you can rely on, or maybe it's a strained relationship with a parent, or maybe it's a very toxic relationship with a boss or a coworker, for example. Every single day, we are in connection with people, with other people. We have to come to a place of being able to co-regulate with them. And there probably is no perfect picture of this, right? Like, you're co-regulating also means having those hard conversations and strained interactions, because every time that happens, that is the other person basically holding up a mirror for you to look at yourself. And so now I take that information of how I'm triggered or how I reacted and so on and so forth, and I take that awareness and information and I incorporate it back into my own modes of self-care and self-regulation. But the most optimal space that we can try to be in is to have modes of self-regulation or self-care, and have a plan for our own self-regulation and work on that, because it's the only thing that we have control of, so that we can show up in our relationships as a healthier us, and be able to have those hard conversations if necessary. So we have self-regulation and co-regulation, and this is why relationships are so important to work on as a form of self-care. Major. Let's see if anybody else had anything to say. No one else. Thank you, Kathleen, again for jumping in and watching. Probably going to expand this into a class or course. If you have interest in that, or if any of these topics you either have feedback around, you have personal experiences you want to share about, or you are thinking, shit, I got to dive deeper into all of this, let me know. Feel free, if you don't want to comment here in like a more public forum, even though this is a private group, feel free to message me directly, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you and kind of go a little bit deeper. This is what I do. I coach around all of these concepts: the self regulation, the co regulation, the self care, trauma resolution, all of these things. Um, and I want to thank everybody for listening once again. If you have any comments or feedback, drop it in the comments or message me, and we'll talk soon.